Thank you guys for joining in. I'm really glad that we got this broad panel together, and I think we can look at open banking from different perspectives and try to give the audience a little bit of a leap into the future of what's going to happen in the European landscape. But first, it might be nice to hear a little bit more about you. So maybe Aleksandra, would you give us a brief talk about your background and what PKO Bank is up to?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Aleksandra. I'm head of strategy projects and digital transformation at PKO. So my role right now is not only to pursue a very aggressive open banking strategy, as you will hear in a few minutes, but also digitalize our company. What is known about PKO is that we are the largest traditional bank. What is little bit less known is that we are also a largest mobile-only bank. We have 3 million mobile clients, 1.5 million mobile only, so they just communicate with us
really nice.
App. Yeah. In this context, open banking is a big topic for us.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Mikael.
Hey, hi everybody. My name is Möglich. I'm leading the European market development for Monese. Monese is a UK-based challenger bank, so mobile-only bank, founded in 2015. Our focus is people who are very international, who are mostly living not in the country that they were born in. So we're available in 31 European markets. The targets, so expatriates, work migrants, international students, freelancers, families with mixed nationality backgrounds. Yep. And so we'll have global ambitions, and as we are an e-money institution, we are open from day one, so open banking is super important to us.
Yep. Great, thank you.
Cool,
Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Morning everybody, Jim Wadsworth from Mastercard. Hopefully most people in the room know who Mastercard is. Very pleased to be sponsoring this great event and personally delighted to be in Poland again. My responsibilities are to lead that which Mastercard is doing in relation to open banking and helping this new, really exciting and really important ecosystem to become a success. So very much looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, great. So we thought I'd basically start off a little bit with the exploration on where we currently stand, right? So would you like to give that a start, Aleksandra?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so as I said, we have this great database of clients, and the clients are demanding, so we know we cannot deliver by ourselves. Yeah. In fact, when you look at the last year innovations of ourselves, over half comes from a cooperation with Fintech, right? Starting from blockchain, OCR, value-added services for SMEs, etc. So I mean, we know we cannot do it by ourselves. So in this context, open banking is very important. And we decided for a very aggressive strategy, meaning we have a dedicated tribe just working on the solutions. We were the first institution to obtain a TPP license, from what we know, in Poland. So, I mean, this is important. At the same time, we see that there are challenges with the process, and it's still very early on. Yep. I mean, so for example, the whole sandbox exercise revealed that we have still a lot of discussions in front of us. I mean, just to give you an example, when we launched our sandbox, like 50 institutions immediately checked in, and then we sent our welcome email asking them to introduce themselves, and over half did not reply. And the 10% went through a process. So that makes you wonder, yeah? Yeah. And what is even more important is that our main asset is the trust of our clients. Yeah. So we cannot compromise on that. If there will be any data breach or unsecurity for a client, we will be blamed. Yep. In this context, we have to be very careful.
And that's still rough territory, I think, indeed, how sort of the balance in the value chain is going to iron out. Yeah. Michael, how do you see that basically from a Monese perspective? Do you see that things are really opening up for you?
Yeah, so from our perspective, I mean, obviously we also need to share data, but as we are a tech company also, we will manage that, and we're like on track. So the more exciting aspect for us is really the consumer side of open banking, i.e. working with partners, with service providers to allow information sharing and providing new services, exciting services to consumers. And you asked about like what's the status in the industry. So obviously everybody's kind of working out like what should be the services, where do I position myself, what can I offer to make a difference. So we are also looking at who's out there. We have specific requirements when it comes to working with third-party providers. I mean, that's our overall approach as a platform. platform bank. We're working with best-of-breed companies. But if you really look at the ones that we need, those have to be Europe-wide, active in kind of across Europe. We need people who have experience in the field and not just kind of opportunistically decide, hey, that sounds like a great thing. I just want to be there. And if you then kind of, and there's a couple of other requirements, and if you unpeel that onion, you look at who's out there. There aren't that many people like CPPs, third-party providers, who are there yet. So this ecosystem is in the process of development.
So I think on the front end of financial institutions, I think it's still limited what's really happening, right? Still a sandboxing phase, and basically on the back end, that's where the cooperation is happening. But I think in the UK, we can see a nice example, or at least where, let's say, the front end has been opened up for over a year now. How do you see that, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to the UK in a second, but I think first thing to say is that open banking is a global conversation. So our customers, wherever they are in the world, are very actively talking to us about what does it mean. Regulators are talking to us about, what are our thoughts on the topic. So it's absolutely a global topic, global phenomenon, with a lot of eyes watching what's happening in Europe. Clearly 2019 is a very important date. Very important year in Europe, and yeah, fine. It'll be I agree. It'll be a bit slow to get going and all that sort of thing. 2019 and probably the first half of 2020 will be much more about APIs stabilizing and banks getting themselves organized and third parties working out what to do. But going back to your question about the UK, I'm personally based in London, and the UK's domestic version of open banking went live in the beginning of 2018. And through 2018, what we mostly saw was, frankly, performance stabilization, people working out what it meant. But as we got into the first part of 2019, we've really seen strong uptick in activity. There's an organization in the UK called the Open Banking Implementation Entity. I guess branding wasn't part of their focus.
That's always rough.
But they've done a great job in kind of coordinating the largest UK financial institutions to get to the point they've got to. And very helpfully, they report quite a lot of data on a monthly basis. And one of the things they report is just simply the number of clicks going through banks' APIs. So the most recent statistic was for March, month of March, 38 million clicks. In itself, not a huge number, but what was really interesting was the change over February. February's data, 27 million. So 30% month-over-month growth. And talking in private, if you like, to some of the larger banks, as we do, what they tell us is consistent with that. But really interestingly, what those banks also tell us is that overwhelmingly what's driving that volume and that volume increase are various forms of fintech, various forms of entrepreneurial startup. Yes, the banks themselves all have their own account aggregation services. They're increasingly, as you'd expect and hope, re-engineering their lending processes. You talked in your speech about mortgage. No, I agree. Nobody wants to buy a mortgage. They want to buy a house. But if you can streamline that lending process as a mortgage provider, that's a good thing. So the banks are all doing that. But the real volume growth we're seeing in the UK now is driven by the fintech industry.
Okay.
I think we all agree that, ultimately it will be big because it's good for clients. And I like the quote that we are no longer in a banking business, we are in customer experience business. So what's good for client will eventually win, yes? And that's why for a big bank it's such simple. Aggregator be aggregated,
Yeah, no, exactly. But so what are the biggest challenges for that, would you see? Maybe regulatory, or let's say, what is sort of the next hurdle that you see for coming?
Well, regulatory, technical, probably more than technical, it's very important. Also a client is a challenge. The client's education, the client's awareness, from what we heard from some UK players, when clients sign up to a feature, after a 90 days consent renewal, like 80% of them dropped off, yes? Was the feature bad, or was the awareness not yet built? So client education will be a huge thing, and the client security, how to make sure they will use it responsibly.
Exactly, I think that's definitely a challenge, because they already hardly understand financial services, let alone the complex ecosystem that's now coming behind it.
They don't want to even,
How do you deal with that, Michael?
I think another big challenge there is trust, right? Open banking is also customers they need to share personal data or data that is very sensitive, and they wouldn't do this. In particular, they wouldn't necessarily share it with an unknown fintech company if they didn't trust that company, right?
And by the way, for the last 10 years, we taught them not to do so, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all right. I mean, obviously, we were positioned a little differently, but yes, so making sure that customers perceive like us as a trusted partner that is reachable, that communicates, that they can communicate to is super important. And then, as you also mentioned, Aleksandra, the fact that customers need to understand what these new information, these new kind of options they have mean for them. What are the services? And like we can call it whatever we like, they don't care. And they need not care, but they need to experience services that make their lives better and provide benefits. And that's the challenge. I mean, obviously we have lots of ideas and there's great ideas out there. But getting this closer, like getting this into the hands of the consumers so that they try it and experience it, make it super intuitive and easy, that is a challenge. It's a good thing, right? So it's kind of like inspiring, but it will take some time.
Yeah. How do you see that, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, we think the whole trend to open banking, more generally open data, is a very exciting thing and become a very big change for our industry. And I think when we look back in 10 years' time, a lot of the current sort of, if you like, speed bumps will be seen as just that. That said, we think that, particularly when you think about PSD2 and more generally what's going on in Europe, there are a few things that really need to be addressed now before the market really gets going, just to kind of avoid some of the issues. So, I mean, the guys talked about customers' trust as for example. One of the ways that our customers trust us is to look after them. So what happens when something goes wrong? You really can lose trust very quickly if you don't address that properly. Equally, you can really reinforce that positive relationship between customer and provider if when something does go wrong, you fix it really efficiently. So there's a couple of things that we're launching. Poland's one of our launch markets. Firstly, to help banks and other ASPSPs in the jargon identify problems up front. So is this third party actually regulated, for example? But secondly, also working with the industry to create effectively a disputes resolution framework. That's not something that the regulation talks to, but it's clearly needed. Mastercard, other providers are available. Mastercard has some strengths in that area from our cards heritage, so we're looking to extend that capability to really help this new ecosystem evolve safely. The other challenge that is emerging is, frankly, competing API standards. If you're trying to create, Monese is a great example, trying to create a proposition that spans multiple countries, the region as a whole, prospectively the world in time, you've got to deal with a lot of different API standards, and every bank implements things in a slightly different way, quite understandably. So there's a legitimate and growing market of aggregators effectively intermediating that. So one of the other things we're launching is a single place for a TPP to go to, connect once. We'll deal with the complexity of reaching out into the different banks, really to let those TPPs focus on their service innovation.
Okay, I think there's definitely a challenge and opportunity at the same time, right? I think the difficulty in the API landscape that we're going to look at.
And maybe let me add to that, just because you mentioned APIs. So this is like open APIs, they're kind of like a super progress that kind of fuels a lot of industries, and it's super powerful. But obviously, it also means that if you work with a lot of partners, you have to be on top of what they do, right? So
they're changing all the time.
Exactly, right? And that's that can be a challenge, right? So you have to build that muscle to do that.
That's right.
And this will only become more relevant as we're seeing a further fragmentation of the value chain, new players, fintechs coming and picking certain pieces and doing those kind of really well, but maybe then obviously connecting via APIs with all the players around them. So
how do you see the role of basically the landscape changing, and how, let's say, because I think it becomes more and more an enlarged value chain with a lot of players that you need to sort of manage. Are we actually capable of doing that already? And for example, are the regulators up for looking at that landscape and playing a new role to actually govern that system? Because it becomes much more complex than they're used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at what's about to go live in Australia, for example, again, driven by regulation, they're not doing anything about payment the way that we have PISP type rules here in Europe, but what they are doing is extending the data type equivalent rules, AISP equivalent, well beyond just payment accounts into not just financial services products, although they are covering things like investment and savings accounts. They're even going beyond that into utilities like telecoms or whatever else, and it's really that move towards open data. So I think, you know, there are regulators who are very clearly thinking very big indeed. But when it comes back to here in Europe, I think the regulators have effectively started something. Yeah, there are some things which the industry needs to fix, but I would say the industry needs to fix them. Regulators need to give time for that to evolve, as we again we saw in the UK. It does take some time for this sort of stuff to settle down. There are some clear problems that we can fix up front, but I think that's better done by the industry rather than by more regulation.
Yeah. Well, what do you expect? PSD3 or rather open data standard across the board?
Well, I mean, clearly there are conversations in Brussels already about PSD3, that's kind of
Not
fine.
sure we're going to stop them indeed. So.
But no, I mean, you know, it's clearly a legitimate view. But I think, you know, I guess our view is it's new. It's frankly not live yet, so let's give it a chance to evolve, to thrive. There will, of course, be mistakes along the way. Yeah. Some fintechs will succeed and fail. Some banks will get things wrong, and some will get things right. We'll see.
What is important is to cooperate, yes? So it's good to create a forum where banks, fintechs, everyone talks. I mean, they are not our competition. They are rather accelerators in multiple dimensions. And many questions are coming, and many questions will come, yes? Because you can only learn by doing, yes? Yep. Sandboxes exercise, we know it. Now, in front of us, the certification quality process exercise. We see challenges. There will be more questions to come.
And do you see sufficient cooperation with the regulators to actually together explore what is going to happen now? Because indeed, it's quite uncharted territory. Or would you like to hand the call out to do that more?
I mean,
I can do it for you if you like.
You cannot cooperate too much, I think.
Okay,
yes. So, I mean,
that's a nice statement. What do you think, Michael?
There's clearly a very important role, crucial role to play for regulators, and I mean, if you step back, they've done a good job, right? So, in the sense that they opened up something on a European market. It's about empowering the consumer. I mean, if you really look at it from a very high level, that's very encouraging and really good job. But then also they want to foster innovation, and innovation thrives on kind of diversity of regulated approaches and models. Innovation thrives on kind of regional approaches and openness. This is all not so easy to achieve in a context where we have like how many countries, depending on like where you cut, but like 31 countries, let's say, in the European Economic Area. So definitely there's a strong role. There will be things to fix after PSD2, but then there's also the fact that if you really want kind of fintechs to evolve and this entire segment to drive innovation, you can't control it all in the sense that you need to delegate something, you need to set clear guidelines and standards, you need to enforce
it's better to create a platform
and encourage cooperation.
And how do you all three basically see the cooperation with big media and tech firms, which I think is one of the things that I see, at least on the European level, the regulators struggling with, right? Because they're increasingly playing along in the financial value chain, but the exact role is still quite undefined. Do you see them as interesting partners in general for business, and is that already being explored in various ways?
I mean, we partner with all of those obvious brands in a variety of different ways. So, you know, absolutely, it's about partnerships, and I think we have a decent track record of doing that, both with the very largest firms, some of those that you mentioned, but equally very small fintechs. We work very closely with a bunch of startups too, and I think, you know, we're also seeing banks across Europe increasingly embracing that partnership model. PKO are doing a great job on that in the UK. HSBC have done a great job. They were the first UK bank to launch an account aggregation service, and they did that with a 9-person startup. Now that 9-person startup is now 109 people in a year and a half, but that reflects, you know, a very brave decision by HSBC, and great to see.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, generally in the future, I really believe in these ecosystems environment where bank plays a role, but it's not the most important partner, yes. Because
it's more about the digital ecosystem,
I mean, clients
not the
don't want to
financial
bank,
one,
they want to do stuff, and we have to remember about it. So the platforms and the partnerships is the only way to do it, in a reasonably fast time.
Right, yeah, thanks.
And then for us, obviously, as a platform bank, cooperation is the essence of what we're doing. We're partnering with so many players, and we're partnering with players in one area where at the same time in other areas we're competing with, so it's an intense spirit of co-opetition. That will intensify, but that's also a way that allows us to grow fast.
Yeah. All right. Great, thanks. I think our time is up. I saw some questions coming by on Slido, but I think sort of along the way we've managed to address those. So I hope you feel content about this all in the room. I really hope you enjoyed the session. Please give our esteemed panel a big hand. Jim, Aleksandra, and Mika.
Thank you.
Thank you.